Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. In today's session, let's talk about our new indicator, RSI impact heat map. So this is a very simple indicator, and what we do here is we try to capture certain RSI event such as crossover of 70 or crossover of 30 or whatever the user configures here, and then we'll wait for certain number of bars and measure what is the positive price movement and negative price movement in that particular number of bars and plot it here in the chart. So the x-axis here represents positive price movement and the y-axis here represent negative price movement. Like, if the price dropped after that particular event, you'll see more plots on this quadrant, like Q2 quadrant, because the price dropped and price didn't increase. And if you see, if it led to a bullish event and price went up, then you'll see more data on this quadrant. And you can see that this quadrant, that price went up and it didn't go down by much. And this quarter is kind of extreme price movements. This quadrant, we can say that price went up as well as went down in that particular on that particular instances, and it led to high volatility, that kind of thing. So and also this is actually a scatter plot implementation using a heat map, since Pine doesn't provide another better ways to implement scatter plot. Tried using the tables to implement this way. Also, please note that the distribution of the points, like for example, every sample is marked on a cell, and you can see that some cells are brighter and some are darker. So brighter cells means there's more distribution there. If you look at this, the count is 5 here out of 444, but if you look at the lighter ones, there's only one. So it depends on the distribution. The cells are also more brighter, so that by looking at this chart, you can actually say that what actually happens after a crossover of RSI crossover 70. What generally happens after RSI crossover of 70, right? So the more points is there, like this is the more most feasible possible occurrence, and least possible occurrences, there's there's not much happens, like not many times the price went in both directions. Most of the times price movement is below the median price movement. um, Also, so the quadrants, if you divide this chart into four, for example, I've marked these lines just for the reference. So it's half of y-axis and half of y-axis. So this quadrant here is Q1, which is an area of high x and high y, and this quadrant is Q2, which is high y and low x, and this is Q3, where both x and y are relatively low, and this is Q4, where x is higher and y is low. So with respect to our example here, we have plotted positive price movement over x-axis and negative price movement over y-axis. So if more plots are found under this quadrant, which is Q4 quadrant, that means that the event is more bullish. And if you find more plots under this quadrant, which is Q2 quadrant, that means that the event is more bearish. And if you find more data under this quadrant or this quadrant, that means that it's not tradable. Those events are like, it doesn't make much meaning out of this, right? So more plots under Q3 can be solved, but if you find more plots under Q4, that means that it's definitely not tradable, because it's a very high volatility environment, and these events will not be able to predict which way the price will go and all. Okay, so and by looking at the input variables here, right? So we already mentioned we can select a trigger here, the duration, and the reference. So you can measure price movement in terms of ATR or in terms of percentage. So if you say ATR, so the price movements are captured as number of times the ATR. You can see that 5.61x to 5.79x, something like that. So if I change it to percentage now, what happens is Look at this, and 8.26% onwards, or 1.3 to 1.49% negative displacement. So this will provide the data in terms of percentage instead of providing it in terms of number of times the ATR, right? So, and if you want to increase the duration, you can increase, like let's say your trading duration is more than 20 bars, so you can actually make it 100 bars. So not 1000, 100 bars. So if you do that, then it will try to capture the information based on that, like after 100 bars, how many times the price, what is the maximum price displacement on a positive side and negative side. So both are captured here. You can see that this quadrant has a little bit higher number now after 100 days. But this crossover 70, like generally considered as a overbought condition. And you can see that clearly that the more number of instances, it actually led to bullish environments, right? So 73 times the price went down, but 127 times price went up. But even with that, you can say that 235 number of times the price didn't go anywhere. Like, it is below the median. So to solve this issue, there's one thing which you can do is can reduce the outlier percentage. So the outlier is defined as this. So outlier means that if you include 100%, what happens is most of the plots are distributed in Q3. That's because these boundaries are generated based on the samples, like the maximum x and y in the samples. Based on that, these boundaries are selected, but you can see that the number of items here is very less, right? So it doesn't generally give a meaningful plot or meaningful chart, which is and we cannot interpret anything with this. We cannot say that that it leads to more bullish environment or bearish environments. So what we have to do is we have to reduce the number of outliers. So also let me make it to ATR, so that this is what I used. So if you look at 100 for ATR, it's very clear, like most of the things happen here. So there's nothing here, almost nothing here, 0 and 0. But since there is one occurrence here which led to 80x displacement in 20 bars. That's pretty extreme. So because of that, it actually created the boundaries, or created the scale this high. So for that, what we need to do is, in order to reduce the outliers, what we have done is we have only considered first 95 percentile, right? So that means that these extreme things will be ignored while creating the boundaries, right? And that boundaries, like whatever is 80x will be added to this particular place. But it will not be considered as a for selecting your boundaries, x values scale and y value scales. So with 95, you have this again, like 273 times it's still in the third quadrant, and 104 more times bullish and less times bearish. But still we cannot determine anything, because most of the distribution here is in this region, right? Third quadrant. So you can reduce it further. Let's say let's reduce it to 80, see what happens. So you can see that it's decreased a lot now, and these three have increased meanwhile. So you can see that 181 times it's bullish, and 132 times bearish, and 43 times it's more volatile. So with this, it's still it's difficult to say that it's overall it generates a bullish environment. You can probably reduce it much less, and say 70, and this is probably the most we can go. And 180, 143, and it actually increased this part and didn't really increase this part much. So overall, it says that you cannot use this RSI crossover 70 as a reliable parameter to go either long or short, because most of the times you're going to fail. Like if you go long, you can see that 94 plus 143, which is like 240 237 times will actually end up being stopped, whereas 180 times will be like your trade will be successful, and 27 times you'll go nowhere. So it may reduce more losses instead of more profit. And similarly, you cannot definitely cannot go into short as well, because this number itself is higher than what we have for the bearish environment. Okay, so we discussed this, and the heat map size it just says how many number of rows and columns we need to have. We can actually increase it much little bit up to 90. It will take more space as well, and it won't really matter much if we increase, because anyway we'll try to fit all the data, and these heat maps, like these plots will have the higher count if there's really a higher count and all these things. So it really doesn't matter much. Go with whatever size you feel you're comfortable. But if you make it too less, like 10, it may be like it will be very congested. Look at this, it's very congested, so you may not get much information out of this as well. So try to increase it, but you don't need to really increase it much, too much. So I've set 50 as a default value. You can use it, or you can actually alter based on your preferences. Right, so we discussed about duration, trigger, reference, and all these things, and that's probably it, I believe. And that's all about this indicator. And this is actually a general concept. Like you don't need to work only for RSI. You can actually take this concept and implement it on any of the entry conditions. Right, you have your own strategy. You can use that entry condition also, and prepare a similar plot. But ideally, like if this is available as a library, which will be more meaningful. I look forward to implement this as a library, so that users can programmers can use it under their own for their own implementations of their own conditions. Right, so it can also be like used for moving average cursors, or any other things which you want to test. You can use it for those things as well. One thing I want to highlight is that this particular information here is incorrect. That's because initially when I implemented, I started my x-axis here, like x and y-axis here. So y-axis moved from this way, as same as this, same as the present one, but the y-axis moved from top to bottom. So based on that, I provided this information, but later I changed this implementation to start zero zero coordinate from here. So that's a generic convention, so that it will be more intuitive. Because of that, this particular information doesn't hold true anymore. Sorry, it doesn't hold true anymore. And instead, what I suggest is refer the description which I mentioned in the main chart. So Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and what it means and all, I have mentioned it here, so I can use that instead. Okay, that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye.